Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to do a follow-up video on Husqvarna 372XP chainsaw. This one here, the customer complaint was that it was making a weird noise. Well, if you remember, we looked in the fuel tank and we didn't find anything wrong. We fired it up and it made a weird noise. Taking a look inside the cylinder, we noticed that there was some damage on top of the piston. And it looked like there was some, maybe a foreign object that had moved through there. You can see where something walked along the edge of the piston, put a big dimple right at the exhaust port. It looked like all this damage happened in between the transfers. With this camera, I was able to turn around and look back up toward the combustion chamber. There's our decomp button, spark plug hole. And looking in the squish band, we can see some damage. This guy would zoom in here on it. Here we go. And we'll get a closer look at that here in a little bit. It looks like there was a pretty good sized dent. This is looking into the exhaust port. And that half moon looking damage you see there is actually pinching the top ring. So when I pulled the muffler off, I found this piece of metal. And it's the right shape to fit that damage that I saw on the piston. Not sure what it is. You know, it could be part of a wrist pin clip or a ring locating pin, part of a needle bearing, but it was steel. Now you remember these old fluorescent tube magnifying lights? Well, this is the new version of those, and I have one at home. I think they're advertised, you know, for coin collectors. I mean, look how much detail you can see here. The technology keeps getting better and better. So let's take a closer look at some of the parts of this chainsaw under this magnifying glass. Here's the top of the piston. And what I'm trying to do is determine if this piece of metal had a different shape to it before it was pounded into the shape I found it in. It sat right there for a long time and hammered hard. I don't know if it started there or ended there. This is the side of the piston where we saw that half moon shape, and it actually has the ring pinched right there. Now if you use the theory that it was a clip that holds the wrist pin in, then it would have had to move through a transfer port. And I don't see any kind of evidence of that happening as far as damage on the piston. I mean, here's where the ring that I removed to take the piston off, that's where it was. This side, did I say ring? I meant clip. This side, the clip is still in there. Alright, it's a different style clip than the first one, but it's still in there. And actually the end of it looks a little bit funky. We're going to take a closer look at that. Alright, here's the top of our piston. And there's some damage. There's where the exhaust port would be. And you can see how that piece of metal kind of walked its way back and forth in there. This thing really zooms in, hey? I mean, we really don't need that much detail for working on a chainsaw, but it's kind of cool to investigate. You can see that the two ring locating pins are still on this piston, so we know it wasn't one of those. And when I say that, I mean it wasn't one of those from these parts. There was evidence when I took the saw apart that it had a new base gasket. Someone had put Permatex on it. So I know someone had been in the saw before. And I'm wondering, because I'm not really finding anything yet, I'm wondering if this piece was left in the saw somehow. Whether it was laying in the case or laying in a transfer or stuck to the roof of the cylinder right here maybe and dislodged. So here's the clip that I removed to hold the wrist pin in. And you can see that there's a funny spot there, some damage. Now, if that was from me removing it with a pliers, first of all, you can't really grab right there. And second, I'm going to flip this over and you're going to see there's no damage on the other side. So I have to believe that that damage was from someone poking at it with a screwdriver to try and install it, which is kind of sloppy work, which kind of goes towards maybe some piece got left in there. I don't know. The other clip on the other side that's still in the piston, this looks a little funky. So I removed it, and we're going to take a closer look. This end of the clip, I could have done a better job with the photography here, but this end of the clip looks, I would say, machined. Looks like it was probably made this way. What I was trying to determine is if a piece broke off of here or not. So let's look at the other end. That looks very different, doesn't it? And it almost does look like maybe something broke off of there. If something broke off of there, is the size of the piece of debris I found in the muffler consistent with the size of this clip? Yeah, that looks like a fresh break, doesn't it? I mean, it looks typical like you'd see of a broken bolt where it's shiny in some spots where it freshly broke, but a little rusty in other spots where it's been cracked. So here's the other little piece of Sherlock Holmes work that I think I found. Those two clips, while it's not uncommon for there to be two different shapes of clips, more of a permanent one and one that you can remove, usually they're made out of the same metal. This kind of looks like, a black oxide finish versus a stainless finish kind of thing. Is that piece of metal consistent with that clip? I don't know. It almost looks more consistent with the size of one of those pins, but they're both in there. Maybe they weren't both in the old piston. I don't know. Here we're looking inside the muffler. All of the white-ish speckles that you see, they are aluminum. Couldn't pick it up with a magnet. I can't see any pieces broke off inside the muffler. And I did a more thorough investigation than just what I'm showing you here. There's our spark arrestor screen. Nothing lodged in it. A couple pieces of aluminum. So what does that leave? It leaves the lower connecting rod bearing and the crank bearings. So let's take a closer look at those. I don't see that little bit of damage right there. I think I just did that with the with that tool I used to split the case. But the bearing looks really good. This side, OMG, all of that crust and crud, that is from using biodegradable bar oil. And it just baked in there. I mean, it baked hard. Look how hard that stuff is. I'm trying to find the screws for the oil pump. I want to remove the pump. That's ridiculous. So I eventually did find the screws, and you can see I got the pump out. Now I got the crank out. And by the way, I can't resell this crank. You know, all these parts, I bought the saw so I could strip and flip it on eBay. But when I removed the flywheel, the threads of the nut came off with the threads of the end of the crank came off with the nut. Now, kind of another sign of some sloppy work that had been done previously. So now I am just inspecting the lower rod bearing. I kind of marked it so I knew I was going all the way around. I mean, it looks like all the needles are in there. The cage doesn't look damaged. We'll take a look from this side. I'm just marking it here with a Sharpie. And you'll see that everything looks normal. Although I will say that this bearing just doesn't feel great. It almost feels a little bit sloppy, and I probably wouldn't be comfortable reusing it even if the threads weren't damaged on it. This bearing is a little bit tight, but completely intact. I don't know why it was tight before, because right now I'm able to turn it just by dragging this screwdriver across it. Probably got a little piece of grit in there when I split it. But the bearing looks fine. So there's nothing so far from down below that could be that piece that we found on top of the piston and in the muffler. So these two holes right here are the ones that hold the oil pump on. Now, if one of those bolts that holds the pump on, you know, somehow magically broke and unthreaded through there, which probably seems impossible, but I don't know. It didn't happen. The two bolts are good yet. So I am not sure exactly what happened. My guess is that that piece is still in there from the last time someone had to saw apart. If you see something that I missed, or if you have a different theory, I would love to hear it. Otherwise, we're just going to kind of chalk this one up to a sloppy rebuild from a previous owner of the saw. So that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 372XP X-Torque that was making a weird noise. Thanks for watching. Later.